As mentioned in part 1, this documentary is divided into 3 parts, and this is part 2, and if you haven't seen part 1, make sure to watch it to fully understand how the rift between Snoop, Death Row Records and Suge Knight began. And we ended part 1 with Snoop Dogg connecting with Master P, telling him about his plans to release an album titled F Death Row under Mac 10's label, and Master P advised Snoop not to do that, and instead he wanted to offer Snoop a proposal. And eventually, this conversation between Master P and Snoop led to Master P negotiating a deal with Suge Knight while Suge was still in prison, and they closed the deal, and ultimately Snoop was signed to Master P's No Limit Records, and this was formally announced in March '98. The agreement allowed Death Row to benefit from Snoop's first 3 albums that he would release under No Limit, and Death Row Records also mocked Snoop with a poster that you can see on the screen right now, where they mentioned they would eat off Snoop's first 3 albums under No Limit. So because Master P was able to close the deal with Suge and Death Row, he essentially saved Snoop from a very difficult situation and gave him a new chance to get his life back on track. That's also why Snoop often speaks very positively about Master P, and Snoop has frequently expressed his gratitude, saying that Master P really saved his life and gave him an opportunity to turn things around. And not long after Snoop signed to No Limit Records, there was also a physical confrontation between Snoop and several Death Row Records associates. And this was also about a month after Snoop's controversial interview was published in the Source magazine, in which he spoke about the bad relationship that he had with Death Row Records at that point. And this led up to a physical confrontation that happened on May the 1st in 1998 at the Universal Amphitheater during a Master P's I Got the Hookup comedy show performance, where several No Limit Records artists were performing, including Snoop. And during a break between performances, they left the stage and went to relax in a backstage room. And what happened was that during this break, several Death Row Records associates came to this room, and C Murder initially opened the door when the Death Row people wanted to come in, and basically he told them they were not welcome. But his brother Master P said that it was cool and that they could come in, because not long before that Master P had made a business deal with Suge Knight and Death Row Records to sign Snoop over to No Limit, and that all went down in good harmony. So we had no problems with Death Row Records. And what happened next is not entirely clear because there are 2 different versions. One version was told by Reggie Wright, who was present as a member of the Death Row entourage, and another version, or actually 2 other versions, are told by Snoop. And Reggie Wright explained that he and another guy who was also present by the name of Trevon Lane wanted to discuss with Snoop why he felt that he needed to diss Suge, because Snoop had dissed Suge and Death Row in the Source magazine article and also on the underground tracks that he recorded, in which he also dissed Suge and Death Row while Suge was in prison. And according to Reggie, they wanted to know from Snoop why he did that, even though Death Row had sold Snoop to No Limit Records in good harmony. And at first Snoop and the people from Death Row were just talking, and in the meanwhile all the No Limit people went back to the stage because they had to perform. But Snoop wasn't paying attention, and therefore he ended up in the room by himself with a couple of friends and all the people from Death Row. And he also said there was no intention to harm Snoop that day, but according to Reggie, Snoop was high and he reacted disrespectfully, and as a result of that, Reggie told Trevon Lane to punch Snoop, and he said that after Snoop was punched, he and his cousin Dez, who was also present at that moment, ran away. And what happened next was that Snoop and Dez ran straight into police officers while they had weed in their possession, leading up to them being arrested. And the No Limit artists who were performing on stage got the word that something was wrong involving Snoop, so they ran off stage during the performance to help Snoop, and the music continued to play and gunshots were heard on the beat, causing the audience to panic, thinking that real shots were being fired. And when the No Limit people came outside, they faced the police, who instructed them to get on their knees, but this was refused. And ultimately, the situation de-escalated without any injuries. And Snoop told that he was watching everything from inside the police car, because he and Dez were arrested. And according to Reggie, he and his group blended into the crowd after the incident with Snoop, and they did not have any confrontation with the people from No Limit. And for the most part, Snoop's side of the story is the same, but according to Snoop, he stayed in the room talking to the Death Row people when the No Limit artists went back to the stage to perform, and then someone from the Death Row entourage told Snoop, "You owe Suge an apology," but Snoop responded with "F Suge." And in one interview, Snoop then said that Trevon Lane came up real close to him and he tried to punch Snoop, but Snoop dodged the punch and then he ran away. And he ran straight into police officers with weed in his pocket. and therefore he and his cousin Dez were arrested. And in another interview, Snoop told a slightly different story, and in that version everything went down the same, but when he was left in a room with a couple of friends and the Death Row people, one of the people from Death Row asked Snoop why you disrespect Suge, and Snoop's answer was F Suge, but he didn't realize that all the people from No Limit had left the room because they went back to the stage to perform. And although Snoop wasn't completely by himself, he didn't have the backup from his No Limit record label mates, which he thought he did. So after Snoop said F Suge, he said that Trevon Lane came up real close to him, but before Trevon could do anything, Snoop was the first one to throw a punch, and after that he ran away.
So we get real close, so I'm gonna fire first. Fool, I'm out.
And then he ran straight into the police, causing him to being arrested because he had weed in his pocket. And Dez was also arrested. And Trevon Lane later responded to this story of Snoop in a conversation that he had in an Instagram post with Spider Loke. And in that post, Trevon Lane said, "Yo Spider Loke, it's crazy how the real about Snoop Dogg is finally coming to the light, huh? Of how he stabbed Tupac in the back, he dissed Biggie, then turned around and kissed him and puffy ass. He a fake crip, fake friend and a fake pimp. The dude straight lied and said he bombed on me. Can you believe that? I never heard of no ish like this." So it's clear that according to Trevon Lane, Snoop lied about punching him. And there was also a news report about the whole incident published in the LA Times. And in one part it says, Snoop Doggy Dogg, 26, whose real name is Kelvin Brodus, and Delmar Arnaud, which is Dez's real name, also 26, were given citations for possession of less than an ounce of marijuana at a Def Comedy Jam performance Friday night, and later they corrected this. You can see on the right of the article it says that first they mentioned Def Comedy Jam, but that it was actually the I Got the Hookup comedy show. But back to the article, and then it says, said Sergeant Tom Breisky of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Brodus is believed to be on 3 years probation from a 1997 conviction for possessing a weapon and for a previous parole violation. Brodus told sheriff's deputies that after the two performed at 11 p.m. he went outside to a patio area and was followed by 4 to 6 men. Brodus told deputies that one man in the group slapped him for no reason and then he fled with the others. As Brodus reported the incident to deputies, they searched the two rappers because they smelled of marijuana, authorities said. The deputies found less than an ounce of marijuana in the pockets of the two performers, authorities said. About 60 people rushed from the backstage area to the patrol cars to find the rappers being patted down by the deputies, Breisky said. So this article indicates that Snoop mentioned that he was punched by someone from the Death Row entourage, and the main points in all the versions are very similar, but it's not entirely clear whether Snoop was punched by Trevon, or Trevon tried to punch him but he missed, or Snoop was even the one that punched Trevon. Because if Snoop was the one that hit Trevon, it wouldn't have been wise for him to admit that to the police, and that could have also been the reason why Snoop left that part out on the No Limit Chronicles interview to protect his own image and avoid self-snitching. But of course it's also possible that Snoop exaggerated the story a little bit in the interview where he said that he was the one that hit Trevon Lane. But as often is the case, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. And the police report is also available online, and it shows that Superfly, whose real name is Priest Brooks, was also present and he ran away when the incident occurred. The report states the following. Gangsta rap artist Kelvin Brodus and Delmar Arnaud were arrested by deputies Ron Sabatine, or Ron Sabatine, I don't know how to pronounce it correctly, and Jim Farrell for possession of less than an ounce of marijuana during an incident at the Universal Amphitheater. Another part in this report states, the incident began when 4 to 5 male African Americans approached Mr. Brodus. He recognized them as employees of Death Row Records, a company he just broke away from. One of them struck him in his face with his fist. Mr. Brodus, Mr. Arnaud and the third man, Priest Brooks, immediately ran out of the backstage area, outside to where they knew the deputies were posted. As the three men approached the two deputies, Mr. Arnaud yelled out, "He's got a gun!" Deputies Sabatine and Farrell immediately patted all three men for weapons and discovered that both Brodus and Arnaud had a baggie of marijuana in their pockets. And another part in the report also states, Mr. Brodus was extremely cooperative during the incident, and in fact said that he was thankful that the deputies had been there, as he felt that the assault was intended as an act of intimidation. He told me that he felt that he was in grave danger as a result of leaving Death Row Records and signing with his new label, No Limits, and of course that should be No Limit Records. And then it says, Mr. Brodus also said that he felt Mr. Arnaud was in danger as he is still under contract to Death Row Records. And he said that because Dez was with Snoop at the Amphitheater, but Dez was still signed to Death Row Records at the time. And in fact, a shooting for a music video for the track It Might Sound Crazy that featured Dez was actually already planned shortly after the incident occurred. But Dez didn't want to work with Death Row anymore, and that's why they made an animated video for that track. So Dez and Death Row Records stopped working together for a while, but he was still on the contract. And later they started working together again, and that's how Dez, Corrupt and Superfly appeared on the Chronic 2000 compilation, and Superfly was actually Dez's artist at the time. And Dez wanted to focus on releasing albums and music as an artist, but one day he met Suge, who was in jail at the time, and Suge told him that Dez was a great producer but not a good artist, and that he would never release another Dez album. And Suge advised Dez to focus more on producing beats instead of being an artist. This upset Dez, causing him to walk out of the room, and from that point on, he no longer worked with Death Row Records again. So there was a little sidestep about Dez and the situation with Death Row Records at the time, but back to the police report, because in the final part you can also see that it reveals that Snoop considered the possibility that Suge Knight might have played a role in the death of Tupac, as Snoop also mentioned in the lyrics of the track Death Row is bitches and never again. And this theory had been suggested by various sources years ago, and Snoop did not bring this up himself, but the police officer mentioned it, which is how it came into discussion. And the report states, "During the discussion I said that I knew who killed Tupac Shakur. Mr. Broders responded by saying that it was the man sitting next to Tupac. I asked him if he meant Suge Knight. He replied affirmatively." And this incident that happened at the Amphitheater was also brought up in the track Don't Forget Where You Came From that appeared on the Chronic 2000 compilation that was released on May the 4th in 1999. And this track was recorded by Swoop G, and you might know him from the track Who Got Some Gangsta-ish, which also featured Snoop, Dez, Corrupt and Lil C-Style. And this was actually the first track that Lil C-Style and Swoop G appeared on. It was recorded and released on the Murder Was the Case movie soundtrack, and in those days, Swoop G and Lil C-Style were affiliated with the Dog Pound. And the track Don't Forget Where You Came From was a Swoop G solo track that was released on the Chronic 2000 as I already mentioned, and on the chorus he said,
"I can't believe you would do what you done. Cross death row and forget where you from."
And this line and pretty much the whole track was a direct diss aimed at Snoop. And in the third verse he also mentioned the incident that happened at the Amphitheater, and he said,
"The Amphitheater, remember we gangsters, so we mobbed in our motherfucking Temptators and Gators, pushing our weight."
And later in that verse, Swoop G also mentioned Snoop Dogg getting slapped and running away.
"When he shot you up, you rather run than get him up, 1-on-1.
And at the end of the second verse, Swoop G also mentioned another incident that happened when Snoop Dogg supposedly got his chin bruised at the video shoot for the Twins.
I lost love for your Snoop back then, when Snoop bruised your chin at the video shoot for the Twins."
And Swoop G also spoke about this incident in an interview he did with Bomb First, and he mentioned that his cousin, who also goes by the name of Swoop, supposedly hit Snoop Dogg at the Twins video shoot for the track Round and Round, and the reason was that Snoop owed Swoop G $20,000 for signing a contract with Snoop for Doggy Style Records, which was a sub-label under Death Row Records. So that incident wasn't directly related to the beef between Snoop Dogg and Suge Knight, but I just wanted to point it out and clear it up because Swoop G was a Death Row artist and because he mentioned it on the Chronic 2000 compilation. And on that album, another diss track towards Snoop Dogg was released with the title Easy to Be a Soldier When There Ain't No War, and this track was recorded by The Realest, Swoop G and Lil C-Style, and on that track they dissed Snoop and No Limit Records. And as is generally known, the No Limit artists often refer to themselves as soldiers, so it's clear that this track and this title was a direct diss to No Limit Records. And on the album version, The Realest also dissed Chocolate Bandit, who was a former Death Row artist, but on the radio version that part was replaced, and instead of Chocolate Bandit, The Realest dissed C-Murder from No Limit Records. And he mentioned that C-Murder stole Tupac's lyrics, and that was because C-Murder had released a track titled On My Enemies on his album Boss Salini, and that was very similar as Tupac's unreleased track at the time titled When We Ride on Our Enemies. And for the most part he also used the same lyrics as Tupac. And in another video I will delve deeper into various aspects showing that No Limit Records was inspired by Tupac, with some people simply stating that they copied Tupac. So if you don't want to miss that video, be sure to subscribe to the channel and click on the notification bell. Now back to the track Easy to Be a Soldier When There Ain't No War, in which Swoop G also takes a shot at Snoop Dogg in the second verse, and he said,
"I don't know, forget where you're from to let the world know you a faker. Actor slash rapper slash studio James.
And Lil C-Style does the third verse, and he also takes shots at Snoop saying,
You know they talk about you and you still hang around with the Death Row known gang, Snoop Dogg switch gangs. Talk about the east side, from the Baton Rouge, man.
And in that same verse he also mentioned that Snoop Dogg can't come back to his old hood in Long Beach.
Came and used the big OG, can't come to LBC, our own 19th Street.
And he ends his verse with a diss towards Snoop and Master P, and he says,
I should have ran up in your face when I knew I could up, but the pussy ain't nothing but a hold of me. And again, Snoop Dogg and Master P.
And this wasn't the first time that Swoop G and Lil C-Style appeared on the same track together dissing Snoop Dogg, because on Swoop G's album World Don't Take Me Personally that was released in '98, there's a track titled Busters, the writer version, featuring both rappers, and they dissing Snoop. And the last verse on that track from Lil C-Style is basically the same verse as he also used on Easy to Be a Soldier When There Ain't No War. And if you haven't heard the track before, make sure to check it out because it's straight fire. And Swoop G also mentioned in an interview that something had happened between him and Snoop Dogg on April the 24th in 1999, and that was about a month before the Chronic 2000 was released, and Snoop was set to perform at a live concert at the National Orange Show Event Center in San Bernardino. And when Swoop G heard that Snoop would be there, he decided to go and disrupt the show, and he also discussed this with Reggie Wright, who promised him a death row chain if he could go and mess things up so that Snoop couldn't finish the show. So Swoop G went to the concert with a group of people planning to rush the stage. So when Snoop got on, Swoop G jumped on stage and he had a Death Row Chronic 2000 jacket on, and he started showing his Death Row Chronic 2000 logo that was on the back of his jacket to the crowd to provoke Snoop. So when Snoop realized what was going on, he punched Swoop G. And Swoop G also claimed that he punched Snoop back and that a fight broke out, and that Snoop's cousin Dez even grabbed a speaker and he hit Swoop G with it. And for his efforts to disrupt the show, Swoop G received a death row chain from Reggie Wright. Though it wasn't new, it had been worn by someone else and was missing a diamond. And in that same interview, Swoop G also mentioned that he was later shot in the leg because of the beef between Snoop and Death Row that he was involved in. And in a track that Snoop Dogg recorded years later, I believe somewhere in the 2000s, he rapped a line saying, "Swoop G, get your mind right and holla at me." And I can't recall the exact title of the song and I wasn't able to find it quickly. So if you know which track I'm referring to, make sure to let me know in the comments. And on YouTube you can find a video from 2005 titled Snoop Dogg and Rolling 20's Crip Gang Meeting 2005 rare footage, where Snoop Dogg is seen speaking to a group of Crips. And after Snoop Dogg finishes his speech, Swoop G steps up to say a few words. He tries to drop some game, but it comes across as irrelevant and lacking substance. And Snoop lets him finish speaking, but then checks Swoop G in front of everyone.
And I'm Young Swoop, and it's a whole new different, generation is getting on you. That's right, brother. Last time I said some been mad at you about how you always talk out of pocket. Now, we're going to keep it real. It's the time for little homies to talk. It's time for little homies to shut the fuck up and listen. On some real G, your dialogue ain't needed right now. Listen, you need to hear what's happening. I appreciate you for standing up, but you need to listen.
And Swoop G said nothing back. He just stood there looking at Snoop and he absorbed it like a sponge. And in the interview that Swoop G did with Bomb First, he basically said that he kept his mouth closed when Snoop checked him because he had received $20,000 the same day before the meeting happened. So basically he said that Snoop Dogg had paid him $20,000 that same day, so therefore he thought it was better to shut the fuck up and listen when Snoop told him to. And another funny thing was that on the Chronic 2000, a track was released titled Cindafella, and it was performed by YGD the Top Dog. And even a music video was recorded for it. It was released on Death Row, Too Gangsta for TV. And the video mocked Snoop Dogg by showing how Top Dog, who looked and sounded similar to Snoop, was initially shown wearing a No Limit chain, but was visibly unhappy with it, and then the chain magically transforms into a Death Row chain. And soon after the Chronic 2000 was released, Snoop Dogg's album No Limit Top Dog was also released, and on that record you can also find a track titled Snoopafella. And if you listen to Snoopafella from Snoop and Cindafella from Top Dog, you can hear that both tracks are very, very similar. And later it came to light that the idea for YGD's Cindafella was actually inspired by Snoop's track Snoopafella, and what happened was that somebody in Snoop's camp leaked information to the people from Death Row, and that's how they found out that Snoop was working on a track titled Snoopafella, which was a remake of the original Cindafella by Dana Dane. So back in the days there was some confusion over who made the remake first, Snoop or YGD, because YGD's version was put out first, but actually it was Snoop who first came up with the concept to create a remake of Dana Dane's Cindafella. And in an interview, Reggie Wright also mentioned that they thought that Snoop Dogg's track Snoopafella from the No Limit Top Dog album would be a hit, and that's why Death Row created their own version with their artist YGD the Top Dog, and they put it out first. So those were some shady tactics to spite Snoop. And on Snoop's album No Limit Top Dog, you can also find the track titled Down For My Ends, featuring Snoop Dogg, C-Murder and Magic. And in an episode of the No Limit Chronicles documentary, it was mentioned that the track was intended as a diss track directed at Death Row Records in response to the incident that happened at the Amphitheater. Although Death Row was not mentioned by name, or no Death Row artists were mentioned by name, likely to avoid escalating the beef, but the track was clearly aimed at Death Row when they created it. So this context adds a new layer of the meaning of the lyrics of C-Murder, Magic and Snoop when you listen to the track again. And the No Limit Top Dog album also features a track titled Gangsta Ride by Snoop Dogg featuring Silk the Shocker, and the original version of this track, which has leaked online, has a nearly identical beat and it has the same chorus as the version that was released on the Top Dog album. However, on this version, Dez can be heard instead of Silk the Shocker, and on this version Snoop Dogg fires shots at YGD the Top Dog, Swoop G and Lil C Style. And in the first verse, Snoop addresses what is likely a reference to the Snoop Dogg impersonator YGD the Top Dog, and he raps,
If I hear another trying to sound like me, motherfuckers, if I can't dog pound like me.
And later in that same verse, Snoop says,
You wanna act like, wanna look like, wanna be like, wanna see like, rewrite. I'm tight to the motherfucker. You trying to ride on me for another sucker?
And Snoop's second verse on this track is mainly aimed at Lil C Style and Swoop G, and he also names them directly.
And what's up with these Lil Style and Swoop G? Heard they tried to diss. They on my bitch list. 2 niggas I got to get with.
And in the first part of the second verse, Snoop addresses Lil C Style, who was also featured on the track Death Row is Bitches, in which Lil C Style also dissed Suge, but later he chose to work with Death Row again and turn against Snoop. But this is what Snoop had to say about Lil C Style.
No money having, my ex having, if jet faggot, your tight pack is snagging in the 80s you was.
And Snoop Dogg also refers to the track Who Got Some Gangsta-ish, and in that track Lil C Style disses Lil Half Dead, and Snoop says,
Got kicked off the town because you wasn't down and tried to diss Half Dead, but look at you now.
And then Snoop starts firing some shots at Swoop G and Lil Style together, and he says,
And Swoop G in the 80s you wasn't nowhere to be found. That's probably because you and Lil Style both was from out of town.
And then Snoop refers to Swoop G and Lil Style being from different hoods and also claiming different gangs back in the days.
You was from Compton and Style was from LA. Swoop claimed blood, Style claimed 60s.
And Snoop finishes his verse off by addressing Swoop G by his real name, which is James Parker, and he calls Lil Style Ron C, which was Lil Style's first name before he turned it to Lil C Style.
Ron C and James Parker, y'all walking up the wrong tree, with a real OG.
During the Source Awards that took place on the 18th of August in 1999, Snoop Dogg performed the song Be Please alongside Exhibit and Nate Dogg, and Death Row associates were also present, wearing red Death Row t-shirts, and they attempted to intimidate Eminem because he was part of Dre's team. Eminem's bodyguard spoke about this in an interview, stating that the security was on high alert. Now, I couldn't find much information about Snoop being pressed by Death Row at the Source Awards in 99, but ultimately it all ended without further escalation that day. About a month and a half later, on September the 26th in 1999, the reunion concert featuring Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg took place in Hawaii. And here you can see an image of a ticket from the tour, which shows that other artists such as Eminem, Nate Dogg, Exhibit and Warren G were also part of the tour. Footage from this event was used in the music video for the Snoop and Dre track Just Dippin', which was released on Snoop Dogg's album No Limit Top Dog. And various interviews have revealed that people from the Death Row camp also traveled to Hawaii with the intention to disrupt the reunion concert. And Reggie Wright mentioned that they were on the plane back from Hawaii to back home, and that they were on the plane with Snoop Dogg and Eminem. And the Death Row posse consisted of about 10 to 15 people, while Snoop had around 5 people with him on that plane. And somebody from the Death Row camp reportedly had spit on Snoop, and they also tried to pressure Eminem. And the Death Row camp didn't actually have an issue with Eminem, but the only reason they targeted him was because he was a part of Dr. Dre's team. In an interview that Snoop gave while filming the music video for the track Pimp Slapped, and we're also gonna go more into detail about that track later in this video, But in that interview, Snoop Dogg also mentioned that the people from Death Row had tried to mess things up for the reunion concert in Hawaii, and he also referred to the incident that happened at the Amphitheater. And he also said that he had never said F Death Row until people from Death Row started to come at him, try to cut his hair and whatnot. And this is what he said in that interview. And he also referred to Suge Knight, and he said, quote, "I never had disrespect for him. When I left Death Row, I never said F Death Row. I never came at them sideways until they trying to cut my hair. Were on the same plane as me to Hawaii, try to F up me and Dre little show we had up there, tried to get at me and Dez and Superfly at the Universal, all kind of little trick-ish, tried to get at me at the Source Awards," end quote. So Snoop mentioned the Source Awards, and it could be that he meant the Source Awards in 1999, but it could also be the case that he meant the Source Awards that took place in August of 2000. And that was about a year later after the tour in Hawaii. And the duo the Eastsiders, which consisted of Shady and Goldie Loc, were also present, and they also performed that day, and they were very close to Snoop. And in an interview, Shady mentioned that the Death Row entourage was present to disrupt the event because Dr. Dre and Snoop were set to receive awards, and Death Row people wanted to prevent that from happening. So Death Row associates rushed the stage from both sides to confront Dre and Snoop, but they were unsuccessful as Dre, Snoop and several others managed to escape through the back with the help of security. A few people, including Shady from Snoop's entourage, stayed behind, resulting in a standoff where some blows were exchanged. According to Prodigy of Mobb Deep, Shady really held his ground and he fought with people from Death Row, beating them up all by himself. However, Shady later downplayed the incident in an interview, saying it wasn't as dramatic as it was made out to be. And according to Swoop G, Nate Dogg got his teeth knocked out that day later at a club by another guy named Kid Rock, who was part of the Death Row camp. And guns were allegedly drawn during a standoff that occurred in the club. Ultimately, no shots were fired, but it was a close call and things could have ended very differently. A month after the Source Awards, the compilation album Too Gangsta for Radio was released by Death Row Records on September the 26th in 2000. And this album featured several tracks and skits that dissed Snoop, Dre and Eminem. And one of these tracks had the fitting title F Dre, featuring The Realest, Swoop G and Lil C Style and an unknown rapper named Twist. And as I already mentioned in this video, The Realest, Lil C Style and Swoop G were the same guys that also recorded the track It's Easy to Be a Soldier When There Ain't No War for the Chronic 2000 compilation. And the F Dre track was essentially a response to Dr. Dre and Eminem's song Forgot About Dre, and they also dissed Snoop on it. And in the first verse, The Realest refers to the incident where the Death Row people pressed Eminem at the Source Awards, and he says,
"Out here, just like Eminem, living there just like the rest of them, still testing him at the Source Awards. His bodyguards wasn't protecting him."
And he also refers to Dr. Dre and Snoop getting back together, but Dr. Dre wasn't there for Snoop when he was fighting for his life. And this probably refers to Dr. Dre wasn't really there for Snoop when Snoop was fighting his murder case.
Now you acting like a nigga, you and Snoop are tight. You weren't there when he fighting for his life. That shit ain't right.
And in the chorus, the unknown rapper Twist, who was part of the Realest group, The Last Circle, fired some shots at Snoop and NWA. Because Dr. Dre, Ice Cube and MC Ren got back together for a NWA reunion, and of course Eazy-E had already passed away, so Snoop Dogg basically took Eazy-E's spot when NWA got back together.
So what do you say? There's nobody you hate? If your body full of holes left in chalk and tape, motherfucker Snoop and NWA. Death Row can give a fuck about Dre.
And in the second verse, Swoop G fires shots mainly at Dr. Dre, but also at Eminem, Snoop, and Nate Dogg. And he says,
Nate Dogg, Eminem, and Snoop, and all them bitch motherfuckers that ride with you. I know they sided with you, they gon' hide with you. Yeah, the motherfuckers gon' die with you.
And on the third verse, Lil C Style can be heard, and his entire verse is essentially aimed at Snoop, and he basically mentioned that he wanna catch Snoop, blast his ass, and then smoke weed with his cousin Dez. And in the beginning of his verse he says,
Ain't no telling what I'm gonna do when I catch that scary ass Snoop.
and later he says this,
I just might roll up and cuff your ass, then smoke weed with your cousin Dad. Tell him how I just blast your ass.
So Snoop was threatened multiple times by his former friends whom he had introduced to the rap game on the Murder Was the Case soundtrack. And on the Too Gangsta for Radio album there was another track with the title Real Type Gangster, and this was recorded by Mac Sean, and on that track he also dissed Snoop. And before the track starts you can hear an intro and a little kid can be heard saying to Mac Sean, "Where your bodyguards at?" And Mac Sean replies, "I don't run with no bodyguards, lil homie." And then the little kid says, oh, cause every time Dre and Snoop come to the hood, they got more police than the president. And on this track, Mac Sean accuses Snoop Dogg of copying his style and using similar phrases such as nephew and oh boy. And up next is a small audio clip in which Mac Sean calls out Snoop.
That Snoop trying to talk like Mac Sean, mate. See, they always spit my cane, but never mention my name.
And later in his verse, he also says this.
Always saying nephew, hollering, oh boy, check this dog, I'm the real McCoy.
Now there wasn't a severe beef between Mac Sean and Snoop Dogg, and years later they got back together and started working again, and this was around 2010, and Mac Sean then changed his name to Mac Sean 100, and he even dropped some singles under Snoop Dogg's label Doggy Style Records, so it was cool to see that eventually they worked things out. Now besides the diss tracks on the two Gangsta for Radio album, the booklet also displayed an image of a letter that Snoop Dogg supposedly sent to Suge Knight around the year 2000 when Suge was in prison, and in that letter Snoop put the blame on Dr. Dre and Dez and mentioned that he had no personal issues with Suge. And here you can see the letter and it says, to Big Dog from Snoop Dogg, I know that you're surprised to get this kite from me. Last time we hollered was in October of 1996. I tried to roll up when you was in county jail, but you know Popo wouldn't let me in. Big Dog, word on the street is that we got drama, but until I heard it from you, bullshit goes over my head. I ain't sending you this guy to start no shit. That's Dez and Dre, or those other motherfuckers who pop shit cause they hear you're about to get out. I was hollering at you because I heard you was telling motherfuckers to rent Crips to hang with me. I don't know where that came from. The dudes that hang with me are Long Beach Crips. All they need is to get high and they'll do anything. Now I know ever since you've been hollering at the dude Key to Rock, you heard I'm the shot caller for the Rolling 60s. So that means I don't have to pay them shit. They ain't nothing but some Snoop Dogg groupies anyway. Holla back at me so we can put this behind us. Big Snoop Dogg. Now I don't know if Snoop really wrote this letter or it's a fake letter created to tarnish his reputation. And I think that's the case, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. So let me know in the comments whether you think Snoop actually wrote this letter or if it's just a fake letter to set him up against his own friends. Another attempt by Death Row Records to put Snoop and also Dr. Dre in danger occurred around 99 and 2000 with the video and DVD release by Death Row titled Death Row Uncut 2 Gangsta for TV. And this featured several explicit versions of music videos by former Death Row artists including Snoop. However, between the videos they were continuously dissed by a group of guys in a car, which was actually kind of corny in my opinion. They even provided directions to Snoop and Dre's houses, essentially suggesting that they should be paid a visit. And this of course had the potential to put them in serious danger, because the intention behind this was not to send them a bouquet of flowers or fan mail, but to actually threaten or hurt them. But in later releases they censored their addresses. And directions to Jimmy Iovine's address were also included in the first release of Death Row Uncut to Gangsta for TV, and in an interview, Reggie Wright mentioned that the addresses were removed at Jimmy Iovine's request. And Death Row agreed to this request because Jimmy Iovine paid him $500,000 for it. So at this point, the beef was in full swing, and the next move by Death Row to threaten and undermine Snoop Dogg came at the end of the year 2000. Snoop Dogg's third No Limit album, The Last Meal, was scheduled for release on December the 19th in 2000, and Death Row decided to release a Snoop Dogg album around the same time on October the 31st. And this album featured tracks that Snoop had recorded while he was still signed to Death Row, and the title of this album was Dead Man Walking, which was clearly a direct threat to Snoop Dogg. And even before Snoop's album The Last Meal was released, Death Row made the advanced version of The Last Meal available for free download on their website deathrowrecords2000.com. And on the website a message was displayed encouraging people to vote on which album was better, The Last Meal or Dead Man Walking. And to mess things up for Snoop, they also made the tracks from The Last Meal downloadable in MP3 format, while the Dead Man Walking tracks were only streamable in real audio, so you couldn't download it. So basically you could download the Last Meal album before it was officially released and you didn't have to buy it, but you could only listen to the Dead Man Walking tracks, but to really get the tracks you would need to buy the album. And since Death Row was initially mocking Snoop Dogg for profiting from his first 3 albums released under No Limit, it doesn't really make sense that they would leak his third album, The Last Meal, because it would have a negative impact on the album sales and therefore Death Row would also lose money. And Reggie Wright mentioned in an interview that they got the advanced version of The Last Meal from Snoop's cousin Dez, but Reggie Wright and Dez are not really on good terms nowadays, so I don't know if that's really the truth or not. besides putting up the Les Mills album to download for free on the website, they also put out a clear message, or better yet a direct threat to Snoop Dogg. And up next is a clip from the death threat that was put on the website deathrowrecords2000.com. So as you can see, the message was very clear. Suge is coming home, and Snoop needed to be on guard and fear for his life. And about a month and a half later, Snoop's album The Last Meal was released, and on that record there were no tracks where Snoop Dogg mentioned Suge Knight or Death Row by name. However, on the track Lay Low, there was a line that could be a subliminal diss to Suge Knight, where Snoop Dogg says,
Unseen but well heard, do not disturb. The only reason you alive, cause I ain't sent a word.
Somewhere in 2001, Snoop Dogg also recorded a track titled So Hard, which can also be found online with the title Fuck Suge Knight, and this track was later released in 2006 on the Mo Talks West Coast Finest compilation, but some lyrics indicate that the track was recorded in 2001. For example, Snoop says,
Jimmy Bones toss a stone, bring it on.
And Jimmy Bones was a character from the movie Bones starring Snoop Dogg, which was released in 2001. And later in the track, Snoop Dogg also says,
She dropped the last meal, but it ain't the last deal.
And in some lines on this track, Snoop Dogg also refers to the Dead Man Walking album that was put out by Death Row Records. And on the intro he says,
Motherfucker still trying to pull out on scandalous ass shit. Serious? Talking shit about her putting records out on the
And Snoop also makes it clear that he's no longer trying to act peaceful, but now he's gonna fight fire with fire.
I've been trying to act like Martin Luther King, keep it real peaceful. But I guess I gotta get my Malcolm X on these snoopers right about now.
And later in the track, Snoop Dogg says another line that also refers to the Dead Man Walking album, and he says,
Why you say I'm a dead man? Keep talking. Don't even trip, doggy dog. Nigga, keep walking, cause they keep stalking with all that cheap talking.
And Snoop Dogg also fires some shots at Suge Knight with the lines,
Why y'all selling my shit? You ain't no felon, you's a bitch. And your wife on my dick fucking groupie. And you doing time in Camp Snoopy.
And Snoop also points out Suge's affiliation with the Pyru Bloods, and he says,
You ain't no Pyru. If I was you, I'd prostitute.
Most people already know that Pyru is associated with the Bloods gang, and Snoop Dogg represents the Crips, and the color that represents the Bloods is red, and the color that represents the Crips is blue. And therefore he also says,
It's all about blue, it ain't about red. And I won't stop crippin' even when I'm dead.
And at the end of the track, Snoop Dogg also replies to the message that was put out on the Death Row website with the text All dogs run and hide, followed by gunshots, saying Suge is coming home. So Snoop Dogg said,
I ain't running and I ain't hide. I'm east side for life. Y'all know where to find me.
And he ends the song with a very clear message that shows his feelings towards Suge at that time, and he said,
Suge Knight is a bitch.